Hi guys, Tom from Video Game Music Theory here. Today, we're going to take a trip back in time to the year 1988, when Mega Man 2 was first released on the Nintendo Entertainment System. We're going to be taking a look at a track today called Metalman Stage. You may recognize it if you've ever played Mega Man 2. One thing I'd like to say before we start is that I haven't been able to do as many retro tracks as I'd like on the blog, especially since I've converted it to a vlog with a V. Now, I get a lot of requests for this kind of stuff because a lot of people love these chiptunes and they bring back the nostalgia and all of that, and I do want to get around to doing more of this. But it's been kind of hard since, you know, so many good game soundtracks have come out, like Transistor, which I've covered in 2 videos, and Mario Kart 8, which I haven't covered yet, but you can count on it that I will come around to Mario Kart 8 pretty soon. Now, anyway, basically I just want to do more retro videos, so we're going to start with Mega Man 2. Yeah, let's dive right in. That's enough for now. Let's talk about a couple of concepts and a couple of things that I just want to remember about the whole tune to start. The first thing is that in any of these retro tunes, you have to remember that the Nintendo Entertainment System and a lot of these old consoles' audio chips were actually very, very, very primitive and very, some would say, limiting to the composer. What I mean by that is you can only have like 4 tracks going on at once, and if you're talking to someone who writes for, say, orchestra, where you have as many as 25 or 30 different voices doing different things, yeah, it can be limiting. So, you can really hear that in an environment like this where you can only have 3 voices and drums, the best way to create an active soundscape is via active counterpoint. And that's very evident in this introductory section. We have this, we're going to call the voices the bass, the tenor, and the soprano, just for the sake of simplicity. The main melody of this intro section is carried in the tenor. It's this long, you know, obviously when we're talking about counterpoint, the longer notes are the ones that are going to be more pronounced. So, and it carries the syncopation along with it, and that's what propels it forward and makes it interesting and creates this environment that we're going to live in. And we have this window dressing on top, which is this little ostinato repeated, and we're gonna hear this little pattern come back later. And in contrast to that, in contrast to both of these syncopations, we have the less syncopated contrapuntal measure in the bass. I say bass because it's actually very high, which I haven't done NES music in a long time, but it makes me think that perhaps the audio chip couldn't handle sounds that were too low, or they just sounded bad when they're too low. And that makes sense when you think of just 80s technology in general. But I digress. We have this it has the little syncopation at the end of beat 3, but we actually have this quarter note in contrast with the dotted, or the short 8th 16th pattern here. And it sounds like it could, like on paper it looks like that could clash, but in actuality it sounds great, as you've heard. One other thing I want to talk about the intro before we get into the next section is the idea of counterpoint fading into unity. And that's what happens in this 4th bar, is we have these 3 voices that are kind of going off doing their own thing, and they're obviously following the tenor, and the tenor's leading the way, but then we get to this 4th bar, and they just suddenly snap into attention. And it's like watching a marching band. Like, I'm sure if you've ever seen any of those crazy marching band videos on YouTube where you have like the parts where the band like goes crazy and starts doing like dances and stuff, like everybody starts doing their own thing, and then suddenly they snap into attention. It's just, it looks so crisp after such chaos, and that's exactly the effect you get here. So let's give this another listen. Just snaps right to it. It's super clean, super crisp, and once well done like that, it's great. Same effect there. we'll look at the next next 8 bars, I guess. Another point that I should mention, that I forgot to mention on this take, is that another thing that the counterpoint really helps with is that the harmony of this track is actually incredibly complex. We go from basically alternating between the pretty normal key. We're in B flat minor, of course, but the pretty simple minor chord progression of minor 1 to major 6 to 7 to 1. It's a pretty poppy chord progression, and it's not, you know, going to win any harmony awards of 1988. But it doesn't matter. That's not what we're here for. We're here for the action, the excitement, and this counterpoint definitely does the job. Now, if we take a look here, again, the melody now moves up to the soprano. Again, with this long B flat to kind of just bring our ears to it, in case we had forgotten where the melody is. And the tenor gets this little sparse accompaniment pattern, the ostinato from here, to remind us that, yes, this is the same piece. Yes, we're going to be using the same motivic themes. And the bass keeps us grounded with the exact same bass rhythm. And so we get this little 2-bar segment. And then we move into another segment of the unison out of counterpoint, which just brings us straight to attention. And you can hear what that rhythmic unison really does when we're taking a listen. Let's go back a little. And of course that also takes place in this bar. Like, it's really 2 bars of chaos followed by 2 bars of uniformity, even though in the second bar the top 2 voices are doing their own little thing to keep the music moving. So let's listen one more time before we get into the next section. And of course this bar breaks off. They do a lot of these first and second things. And you know, let's listen to the drum solo. I love it. It's so cheesy. Alright, let me make sure we can actually see this next part. Alright. So this is, we're gonna call this the intro. I'm gonna call this the A section, and we're gonna call this the B section. I haven't actually put any of these letters in, so we're gonna do that right now. Listening to the B section, the melody goes from this echoing the syncopation of all the other voices. We go to a longer melody, more based around these quarter notes. And you can hear the of course, we get that motif. Alright, talking about that, it's again another little piece of contrast. And we're going to have this, it's basically a descending pattern over this piece. The melody goes ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and the bass is going da-da-da-da-da-da down to the D flat, going from E flat to D flat, and of course then turning around to bring the excitement up for this super awesome fill in the soprano and the bass, which is about the greatest thing ever written in all time. And basically this whole, like, obviously this is a pretty typical B section in that it's supposed to directly contrast the material but reference it, and that's what we're getting out of this da-da-da-da-da, which I don't think we actually see that exact. I mean, the closest thing we get to that is this ba-ba-ba. Yeah, I think that's as close as we get, but of course, the syncopation is more important than the actual specific motive. So we'll listen to this again, and we're going to see how effective, obviously, this contrast is. I'm going to rewind a little more so you can... Okay. Before we listen to, we'll listen to the thing one last time. on the way out. But a few more things I want to mention is you can hear these two voices are in unison until they break into thirds here, and you can hear how that changes the texture. It's very subtle. It's a very subtle maneuver that's effective in these simpler harmonic contexts, but that's something that you composers should remember if you're trying to write for as few voices as possible, is remember to use your thirds sparingly and to great effect. And again, you can hear like how this whole section is influenced by the high bass, like the bass being all the way up, like the bass is up here, like it's actually on the tenor line, so to speak. And it really creates just kind of completely different soundscapes than what many of us are used to in this day and age. And maybe that's part of what makes it so unique, apart from the very interesting contrapuntal motives echoed between each voice. I'm not saying it's, you know, Bach or anything, but it's obviously very effective writing. So let's give it one more go, and then we'll call it a day. All the way back. Also notice the very sparse use of A natural of the harmonic minor. It only appears here and at the very end in the bass. And that's before that'll be our closing thought, is that even though this is not a harmonically complex piece of music, it can still very effectively use harmony by switching between the different types of minor. It's about 92% natural minor, of course. You can hear that very evidently in the ba-da-da-da, but the very particular use of the A natural at very key points in the music. Notice it's only used in this first ending. Let's try to find that. Let's just listen to it. For a chromatic rising figure, and it's not really. It's only used to just bring this chromatic rise to the end of the phrase. And then at the end, it's used to obviously close out the whole piece with this giant half cadence, which then concludes very effectively. So that'll be the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.